from 6 to 7 p.m. right here on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Tampa Bay's Tan Talk. Entertaining and informative radio for the Sunshine State.
Looking for car shows? Then look no further than FLACarshows.com. On your computer or on your mobile device, FLACarshows.com is a comprehensive list of automotive events, plus videos and news articles. Whether you're looking for car shows, cruise-ins, meetups, automotive festivals, cars and coffees, or anything else relating to an internal combustion engine, then this is a site for you. Check it out online or on your phone at FLACarshows.com.
You may be owed some money. After 911 and 411, call 541. That's 727-541-1741. Call Gulfstream Motorsports for a diminished value report. Due to my 28 years experience in the auto salvage business, I'm very good with wrecks. So if your car's been involved in a wreck, call me for a diminished value report. Call 727-541-1741. You may be owed some money for the lost value of your repaired vehicle. And visit us at GulfstreamMotorsports.com.
If performance is your game, if a drag is your bag, if you love horsepower, smoke, and speed in a safe, controlled atmosphere, then you've come to the right place. Performance on the line. Drag racing is a uniquely American sport. Started at the end of World War II by several Southern California communities, primarily to provide a safe alternative to street racing. Drag strips provide a safe, controlled environment for healthy competition. Now, this American sport has spread all over the world. To Australia, England, Canada, West Germany, to all people who love cars. Drag racing got competition off the street onto the strip, and all kinds of spectators into the stands. It did something else. It blossomed into an enormous sport with 20 million annual spectators, some 800 officially sanctioned drag strips, and no one knows how many drivers. They're all here. Professionals, amateurs, rails, funny cars, super stocks, and street machines. And they gathered early. Orange County Raceway is where it's at, one of the finest strips in the nation. This could be you getting the latest hot setup for your machine from 4 drag team members able to share in the successes and failures. Seems like bench racing is half of the fun. After all, it's the going thing. You're right in the heart of the action in drag racing. Ford has let the drag racing world know that it's really here.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Button up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Hi, this is Dave McClellan, the voice of NHRA. You're listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Okay, listeners, welcome. You're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio and Cars, and I'm your show host, Robert. Run your computers and Google TanTalk1340.com, and you can see us live here in the studios in downtown Clearwater. Don't forget to check out our website, GulfstreamMotorsports.com, where you can find out all about us. And if you've missed any of our past 610 shows, you can go to our archive page, NostalgicRadioandCars.com. Good evening, Bobby. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Well, there's nothing like the mad scramble. You know, I had a whole bunch of stuff to do today, and I was still in the studio, in the support studio, producing stuff for this show, the sound effects. So I don't know if you can find those, Bobby. If you can get that, we'll play that sound effect a little bit later. But we got a real interesting guy. We have a Ford racing legend coming on our show this evening. We've been trying to get this gentleman on for a while, so I'm really excited about that. You know me, I'm a Ford guy, so, you know, just a humble little Ford guy that likes Ford race cars, you know, drag race cars, road race cars, street cars, all that kind of stuff, classic cars. Anyway, shout out to my friends over there at Adventure Classic Cars in Clearwater. I was just over there this afternoon checking out some cars. I had a customer of mine in Arizona looking for a car. And they had they got some nice cars in there. They had a 70 GTO in there, 4-speed car. Apparently it was a local car. I didn't even know about it. Nice little car. It's like green, that apple color green, which Ford had and General Motors had. And I think Chrysler even had something similar to it. But anyway, nice looking car, 4-speed. You got to have a 4-speed. I cannot overemphasize that 4-speed cars bring a 25 to 30% premium. I also stopped at the Ferrari dealership because I'm working on some possible appraisals on Porsches and Ferraris. And I got to tell you, I walked in the Porsche dealership, every car sold. If you want a car, you got to wait. Walked in the Ferrari dealership, every car sold. And, you walk into a Toyota store, Kia store, something like that. It seems like they got a surplus of cars. There's a lot of cars out there, but the market is just really, really, really wacky. I mean, nobody can explain it. I stopped in to a repair shop, European repair shop right down the street here on Myrtle Avenue. And maybe if I dig in my pocket here, I can probably find the card. We'll give them a little shout out too. But they had Gulf Coast European Automotive. They're right over here on Myrtle Avenue. And he had a whole bunch of cars in there. And these cars, like we talk about from time to time on the show, are just getting so sophisticated. And there's just so much stuff on it. If you can afford a late model car and you can afford to find it, lease it, whatever, and keep it while it's under warranty, you're in good shape. But you get these cars that are, mid 2000, like 9, 10, 11, 12. The earlier cars, you can't get parts for them half the time. We have this so-called supply chain issue. But there's a lot of stuff that's just not available for these cars, So it's really, really frustrating because I've been approached here quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. People want to find cars. Well, the auctions are charging tremendous amounts of fees. And the supply of cars are not really there because what a lot of the dealers are doing is they have second and third tier car lots. So they taking their since cars are getting difficult to get for whatever reason, we know. But so what they're doing is they're not apt to wholesale cars like they used to unless they're just complete turds, and then you'll get them. But even in that case, they'll have a secondary lot. So 60 to 100,000 mile cars, and then a third tier lot, which is over 100,000 to 200,000 mile cars. And it's just amazing that people actually buy 180, 190, 200,000 mile cars. Now I get it with classics. Sometimes you can do that. Mileage is irrelevant on a classic if it's a real popular car. But on newer cars, in the old days, if you had 62, 63,000 miles on the car, you were due for an engine rebuild. But, they build things a little bit, in some cases, better, okay? So they may last longer and they get decent mileage, provided you maintain them and change the oil and all that other good stuff. But the cars are so there's just too much electronics in them. I was looking at I was at the Ford dealership today, as a matter of fact, and our good friends over there at Walker Ford. And I was looking, just glancing at some of the new cars, that thing they call a Mustang Mach-E, which they should just call it something E, but maybe Mach-E.
E-scape.
Yeah, E-scape. Yeah. But, and same thing with the Ford Expedition and all the new cars. You peek in there, and there's this giant screen in the middle, and that just bogs my mind. It's like this computer I have sitting over here. So you get in the car, you talk about distractions. I would think, Bobby, you tell me. You get in the car, I want to focus on driving. I mean, it's bad enough that sometimes I get caught at a traffic light texting real quick or responding to somebody, or which I try not to do. At a traffic light, or I pull over if I find a parking spot or something like that, or in a meeting,
gas stations, stuff.
Anything like that. I try not to, but we're so into all this stuff nowadays. It's just distraction after distraction, and not to mention that the cars get to the point where it's autonomous, it's this, it's that. People are just relying on the technology in the cars and not paying attention to driving. And they were just talking today that car crashes is up
10%.
10% over last year. Now, granted,
less, but over the time when there were less people on the road. But multi-car is which is usually a distracted driving type
look
thing.
At this morning when we were coming here to the studio, where you saw that wreck up there on Countryside Boulevard.
Countryside Boulevard.
Yeah, there was 2 cars there, and it's just that's more than one car is a multi-car accident. Okay, but anyway,
but a lot of those are distraction related, and initially when they did all this infotainment stuff, it was, air conditioning wasn't a part of it, the AC control, stuff like that. It was just radio, navigation, maps, whatever. and you had controls on the steering wheel that could do basically everything, so you didn't have to look over there if you wanted to change the channel and stuff like that. Well, now it's going to where everything in, Apple CarPlay, there are some benefits to it, but in Android Auto, but somebody looking at a message preview over there is not something that belongs on a car.
In your car while you're driving,
because it is no different than if you got a 2000 Ford Excursion and you buy one of them things that stick on the windshield that holds your phone up there. It's the same thing.
Well, listen, hey, I'm on the interstate a lot, so, and when I do drive a truck, because I drive a truck or an Excursion or something, I sit up high, and I cannot tell you how many times I've seen this at night. You drive down the road and the guy's got this big flash of light in his face. That's because he's watching his TV, his screen. He's watching a movie. I can see this because I sit up high, and he's not even paying attention to the road. You see him wandering. And then they're in the left lane, diddy bopping. Now, the left lane is for speeding or passing or, just, reckless driving. I don't know. I don't care. But anyway, it's just, it's the go fast lane, not for the guy that's lollygagging on his phone because he's got nothing else to do and he's on the parkway and he's just slumped over in his seat and he's,
Speaking of the parkway.
Yep.
This is why I said on Bill's show that there should be a flashing light or some sort of light on when a Tesla or whatever is in autonomous mode, because I never had any idea until one day I was driving a rollback down the parkway and I could finally see in there and see that the driver was not in an autonomous mode but was texting while driving. So I think I think we have the right to know the difference.
Absolutely.
Know when it's when there's a computer controlling the car and when there's somebody staring at a computer controlling the car.
Well, this whole debate is a good rant for when we need to get Lauren Fix back on our show, because she's got all kinds of stories about this kind of stuff. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a real fun story today show with a guest coming on. We're going to be talking about the good old days of drag racing, and particularly Ford drag racing out of the 60s and 70s. And it's a human interest story. So this gentleman's really cool, and we're looking forward to having him on the show. Bobby, why don't you go ahead and cue up, what do we got on the turntable there?
We will be...
Or do we want to do a couple shout outs? I mean,
know what? This song is perfect for our shout out because Spin Out is the bed behind FLACarshows.com promo.
There you go.
So FLACarshows.com is the place to go to find a car show, no matter which direction you're facing in the state of Florida. You can find a show there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
On Seafoam.
On Seafoam. Oh yeah. Don't forget our good friends at Seafoam, because now we've been kind of tinkering with the Seafoam thing on one of our 400 and how many thousand miles on that thing? That truck?
420.
So we have
1,000.
We have a 99 Ford truck that's F-250 diesel four-wheel drive that's got 429,000 miles. Some little rat we took in on trade, but it's going to be kind of cool when we get done with it. And then our other Excursion,
which is
329,000 miles.
Right?
And we Seafoam the living daylights out of both those things. So I got to tell you, Seafoam in a diesel application, without a doubt, works. Of course, you've been using some of the other Seafoam products, right?
Yes. So their interior and exterior detail products are very good. And the Bug Be Gone, there's a lot of bug products out there, and not all of them you can say great things about. But this stuff, if you spray a little bit of that on there before a rainstorm or something, you will have a lot easier time washing your car after love bug season. I will say that.
Okay, what was the other stuff you used on there? You said to get the green stuff off the side of the truck?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it gets the algae off the side if the car or camper's been sitting for a while under a tree.
All right. Well, anyway, on that note, we're going to go ahead and get our guest on the phone here. Bobby's going to. We just got rudely interrupted here. No, I'm just kidding. The phone just rang. But so like I said, we got these big screens and these TVs and all this kind of goofy stuff going on in these cars nowadays, and it's just like, wow. The thing that we were just talking about this the other day is these older cars, and they're just simple. I mean, there's a lot of cars out of the 70s and 80s that you can kind of do retro upgrades and make them so that they're reliable, drivable cars every day, and you can still have fun with them, still get parts. And like I always tell people, I said your car is an extension of your personality. So drive something that kind of puts a big smile on your face and makes you happy. And obviously, if you need a commuter to get you from point A to point B, well then. We have a 2017 Ford Focus for you, don't we, Bobby? We
do, and that's the kind of cars I'm talking about. It's borderline, but there's not enough, just too much distraction that you're like not focused on the road. You're still you're still, you have things to assist you on the steering wheel to help you change the radio channel, change your Sirius XM channel, whatever the case, whatever you're trying to do. But now we're getting to this, there's the knobs, and then let's, not even get on the whole dial shifter thing. But anyway.
Oh, boy. All right. So go ahead. Let's fire up the stereo here real quick, and let's give our guest a call. And you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Don't touch that dial, because we will be right back with our very special guest for the evening, a legend.
When a motor's warm and she's purring sweet, buddy, let me warn ya, you're on a one-way street. She'll crowd you close, spin your wheels, then you're gonna know how it feels to spin out. Yeah. Spin out. Better watch those curves, never let her steer. If she can shake your nerves, boy, then she can strip your gears. She'll get your heart going fast, then she'll let you run out of gas. So spin out, spin out. The road to love is full of danger signs. Too many guys were lost across those double lines. Don't you know she's out to prove she can really score? Never saw parts move, boy, like that before. To flag you down, that's a goal. Scoot before you lose control. Spin out, spin out. The road to love is full of danger signs. Too many guys were lost across those double lines. Don't you know she's at the prove she can really score? Never saw parts move, boy, like that before. To flag you down, that's a goal. Scoot before you lose control. Let's
Hi, this is Edsel Ford with the Ford Motor Company, and you're listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars. Enjoy the show.
Okay, we're back, and you tune into Nostalgic Radio and Cars. It's time to introduce our special guest for the evening. This gentleman is legendary in the world of Ford racing. He's also been involved in aviation and a number of other interesting things, and he's got a book out right now. And I'm delighted to welcome to the show this evening, Al Joniak. Al, how are you this evening?
Very good, Robert. Nice being invited to your show. It's very nice. Thank you.
Great. So why don't you give us a little background history? I was reading your bio or the articles that were provided to me. And so it's real interesting that you started out, with an old Ford flathead, and you've kind of stuck with Ford through thick and thin. And see, that's me too. I mean, win, lose, or draw, I bleed Ford blue. I'm a Ford guy. So, in fact, it was interesting. We had Jack Telnack, who's who's head of Ford Global Design for a number of years, and he says, when I was born,
sure,
there was a Ford logo tattooed or stamped, branded on my butt. I'm a Ford guy. So we're all on the same page there.
That's terrific. That's pretty good. Yeah. Well, I guess it started out when I asked an old grizzly mechanic a long time ago. It was in his, I can still see him today, 50 some years later. In my mind, he's in a herringbone coveralls with a cap on him. I said, how does the motor work? I said to him. And he says, suck, squeeze, bang, blow. That's how it works.
Yeah, that's it.
I said, holy God. I was stunned. I'm 15 years old. I didn't know nothing, but I know I wanted to learn. And I absolutely didn't know. I just couldn't understand what he said in my logic. So I went to a library and I looked it up, and intake, compression,
Power exhaust. Yeah.
I said, man, I was so smart. I learned all that stuff just by curiosity, and so that really started my thirst for a absolute passion that keeps going today. I'm still doing big time engine development work with a guy down here who's for 30 years been working together with Abbey Performance, and we do a lot of airplane engines with him. But I also help him with his race type engines. Later on, after I stopped racing cars per se, but I helped him with his engines as well. So it's basically, I'm still involved up to my ears in all the latest technology. I'm computer literate. I do computer programming for the double. I do double computer redundant systems for the airplane engines I make. By the way, my engines are airplane engines. They're car engines, but they're in an airplane. So up until about 6 years ago, we had the fastest V8 in the world, approximately 432 mile an hour. And then the guys start going over 250 and 450 rather. Bonneville is where the guys start going that fast with one engine. I was really surprised, but they actually made the 200, I think 400. Excuse me, I keep saying 470 some mile an hour. One of the guys went in one direction. I thought that was fantastic. At any rate, that knocks us out of the fastest V8 in the world. But there's a big deal, a total different discipline for airplanes because it's continuous power. It's a total discipline than regular engines, and for race cars even. Race car engines don't do continuous power. They're basically on and off the throttle, and that's our drag races. They go for 10 seconds. It's nothing compared to the continuous power requirements for aircraft engines.
Well, now let me ask you a question while we're on the subject of that. Okay, so continuous power.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll draw an analogy here. Going down the Autobahn from Munich to Berlin on the Autobahn, I'm at 6,000 RPMs, continuously, wide open. Hopefully I have a car that's reliable. Now, when you talk about that, just like you said, drag racing, you're 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 12 seconds, whatever it might be. Road racing, you're on and off the gas. So for continuous power, to build an engine, because that's basically an endurance engine, okay, what are some of the tricks of the trade that you incorporate in those to make those engines reliable? And what's the foundation of that motor?
Well, it's actually a Chevrolet because the so-called parts are so easy to get and they're so cheap. This Ford stuff is not really available, and I don't care because an engine's an engine. Regarding when you do aftermarket parts, the piston doesn't know what hole it's running up and down it. You understand that?
Right.
It just basically it's a big misnomer about one engine over another. Is basically the head separates one engine from the other, but the displacement is pretty much the constant with whatever displacement you pick. The head makes a difference. Having said that, the engines for endurance are derated. Heat is power, power is heat. So when you make more power, you make more heat. When you take an engine that's say weighs 500-600 pounds, it takes about 10 to 20 minutes to thoroughly heat sink that engine completely to the middle of the valve core, to the top of the piston, to whatever. You have to remove the heat as fast as you make it, or you have detonation and you blow up. That's basically what it amounts to. Okay, so you either derate it, you put it in a safe, what they call a BMEP, a brake mean effective pressure of the engine that can tolerate. That's the load of the engine, and you start going over 250 BMEP, you start getting into trouble. Most engines are under 200, and basically that's really what you got to look at is what is the actual load of the engine and how long you're going to use it. For example, like in the Chevrolet engines, small block, I put 3/8 valve guides in versus the 11/16 because the 3/8 are bigger and gives me 40 more % area to cool the exhaust valve because that's the hottest part of the engine. you're talking about the hottest part of the engine is the exhaust bridge area, especially in the turbo engines like I'm using in the airplanes. All that back pressure from the turbines are basically always generating heat. Never gets a fresh air like the intake does. And so the heat generated is just astronomical. The exhaust valve it's up around 1,400. I repeat, 1,400 degrees. We have to use Inconel valves, or it will never work, even with stainless. It really, it's again, just how much power you want to make, how much heat can you exchange to your cooling system, and we cool the pistons with the oil. We run extra water up through the heads. We do all the things that constitute getting rid of that heat. That's basically what it's about.
All right. Now, you touched on something a second ago. So basically, a short block, okay, is nothing more than an engine, basically, but it's specifically short blocks, nothing more than an air pump. The trick is, like you said, is the heads. Now, let's go back to Ford, okay, because you built some pretty bad motors back in the day. Those of us that are Ford guys know that Ford, for whatever reason, and we're going to blame it on the Falcon and the Mustang because of the shock tower design. So basically, they had this tiny little engine bay, and they had to squeeze this motor in there and the big motor, but they also had to figure out how to get the exhaust out of there. So the way they designed it is the fact that the exhaust manifolds basically kind of sit. The heads kind of go, and you look at a Chevrolet exhaust, and it goes up, straight out, and then in the exhaust and gone. Where a Ford is like it goes in the cylinder head, hits the ceiling of the valve pocket or the exhaust pocket, and then ricochets down. So there's no flow. Right. So then later, I remember when I looked at the Gap and Roush Mustang and the Gap and Roush Pinto Bean, and they had these raised port Cleveland heads, because I used to race Clevelands back in the 70s, and everybody was, they were cutting the bottom of the head there just a quarter of an inch above the exhaust, and then they were raised port was the hot setup. Now the 5.0 motors, when they came out in the 80s, they were all raised ports. So, and then you look at the FE motor, which was your specialty, okay? So you had your basically low riser, your medium riser, and your high riser. Then you had your tunnel ports and your tunnel wedges and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm not sure which motors you all raced, because I know reading up here, you raced pretty much right across the board on the 427. So give us your take on this whole head design issue with Ford.
Well, Ford was a victim of what I call the marketing system. The bigger is better was the marketing concept back in the old days, when you have these giant ports on these engines. When we were talking about the 69 Boss 429, they had a 3-inch hole in the head. It was ridiculous. It was completely out of control. The Cleveland 351 had a port that could feed a 500 cubic inch engine. It was way too big. Boss 302, same thing, same head actually, and with a smaller displacement. Every one of them, I had to reduce the ports by almost 100%. Or 50%. Really? What I meant. Yeah, we had to reduce the ports at least 50% for the 302s. We actually put them about 7/8 fill. It's 5/8 rather. 5/8 fill up the bottom of the port with epoxy, and then raise the port just a little bit on the top, and then have it come in the free flow beautifully. When I raced the Boss 302 with this guy called Dale Phelan, who was the guy I went to work for a long time. He was a big enthusiast for the SCCA Trans Am series, which was very popular, and so it was a nostalgic series at that time. And basically, he had an engine. I took it out. I dynoed it at 385 horsepower. I took the engine and redid it because he had a crazy kid putting it together at a speed shop with a giant lift cam and all this stuff. The totally turbo power band for road racing. He didn't have any mid-range whatsoever. And I got it to go 555 horse. And I cut the ports down literally 5/8 of the size of what they were. And that's basically that still the volume was correct for that particular application. If you want, for example, I built it for a 75 or 100 RPM type maximum RPM because we run 2-hour endurance races as well as far as regular races, and you got to put a shall we say a safety factor in there. At the time, I could have probably make around 600 horse if I took it up to about 8,400 RPM. I redid it a little bit, but I didn't. So the combination of the engine is critical. If I took it up to 8,000, 8,500, I would have to have a bigger port, because the real time is what that nobody understands is that at 8,000 RPMs, it's only 3 milliseconds for the whole combustion chamber to fill and empty in 3 milliseconds. It's just so the things are happening so quickly. There's not enough real time in there to put it in with a small port. So you got to have a bigger port. But more importantly, you got the piston speeds that are pulling that in. The piston is what pulls the air in, not the atmosphere. And that's basically, even though the atmosphere fills it, the piston speed is actually part of the equation nobody uses today. They just don't understand that. You got to have the match between the sectional port area, piston speed, the displacement, and the RPMs that you're going to talk to. It's a whole combination that has to be well looked at. And it's all basically physics. It's all physics. It's all today. All the computer design guys, like I had a so-called high efficiency engine that I put together. I got a patent on it. When I got the patent on it, I wound up talking to some really, really, really smart guys, the physicists and the doctors of the mechanical engine facets that I got to really rub shoulders with. I learned a lot from them. I got a lot of software from them, and I got to be, shall we say, an expert in engine kinematics. And so I really learned a lot by indulging in that. But I really to rub shoulder with these guys who were just fantastic. I got a lot of nice stuff that I could forecast how much the piston weighs at 8,000, 6,000, and that kind of stuff, and how much load you want to be carrying, what the air velocity is going to be at a certain RPM. With that particular port cross-sectional area, it's all part of the physics that has to be done today to really get going. Now, most of that stuff is learned by hit and miss. Most of the stuff that everybody learned, NASCAR included, is by just running hundreds and hundreds of combinations, and they wound up with something that just make it bigger, smaller, whatever, and they just honed in on it. But if you had to start all over again, basically, there's a physics application that you can use for probably getting you right through where you got to go quickly.
How about, okay, so let's talk about carburation and compression for a second. So factor those two in, because one of the things we always used to hear is, because you're talking about basically flow is essentially what you're talking about right now, getting in, getting it out. So, but you're saying that, but in the old days, everybody used to, oh yeah, you got to run an 850 carburetor. Oh, you got to run a 950. You got to run 1150. You got to run a 750. And an engine, which is an air pump, it only flows. It can only take so much. So it was very easy back in the day to overcarburate. But then they made up, got to have more compression. And then there's cam, and there's lift, and there's duration, and there's overlap, and all this stuff. And I'm sure you take all this stuff in, because just like you said, science, physics, all this kind of stuff comes into play. Yeah. So where do you kind of where do you start?
Well, you got to know exactly what you're talking about. First of all, you can't guess. You got to not guess. And so you've got to know how much port area you got, how much your displacement area. And the restriction is the valve. The valve's a restriction.
Okay.
There's no way it's not the head. It's the valve, and the valve has to feed the valve, and it has to do it with velocity, not with flow. That's the biggest lie there is right now.
Really?
My head flows back first. It's all bullshit. You got to have velocity. You got to have velocity to fill up the cylinder. The valve is closing. All the magic happens at the end of the cycle when the piston down and starting to go up. The flow is still coming in, and you got to close the valve at the same time the air is still trying to get into the cylinder. Because if you only filled up this, if you magically took up the head and you open up the atmosphere, you would have 14.7, which is the atmosphere pressure in the cylinder. You got to get it up to be 100 to 10, 120 increased in efficiency. So that means you got to get higher than the atmosphere. And the only way you can do that is with velocity. Velocity is converted into energy. When it stops, the inertia of the air trying to come down this thing starts to build up pressure. That pressure goes over atmosphere. The valve closes at the same time. You're jamming into the cylinder, and the cylinder's coming up, and all that stuff. Just bang, you've got the maximum fill of that particular application. That's how it works, and it's difficult to do.
All right, so let's go to the 427 and the 428. Back in the day, because your big claim to fame is when things really started going for you was a 60.5 428 car when you were part of the Ford drag race team. So what set you apart? Now if I remember correctly, your car was a 4-speed car too, right? Your Cobra Jet.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so
yeah, sure.
So in the day, I always used to make the argument, because I'm a 4-speed guy too, so I love 4-hookers. I could say you can power shift at a 4-speed just as quick as an automatic. The only difference is automatic is consistent. Other than that, it's not faster. Okay, because if you can hammer, if you can power shift, you can power shift, and so that was my theory back then. I know a lot of guys run automatics, but like I said, that's because of the consistency. But back in the day when you were running your car, what made you so much faster than everybody else and consistently faster?
Well, it was a one race deal. You understand that?
Right.
I got called up from Ford, and they says, "Hey, would you want to go race this new car we're coming out with? It's called the Cobra Jet." And he says, "Well, what? Tell me about it." So he told me about the whole car and so forth and so on. And basically, he says, we looked in the mirror. This is the Ford, the Chuck Folger. He was the Ford drag race coordinator at the time. He says, we looked in the mirror and we says, we got to stop racing these stupid ass funny cars. He says, because we gotta sell on Monday after we race on Sunday, and we got nothing to sell. So we got to get a car that everybody would like to buy, and it was the Cobra Jet is what the whole thing was about. And so he says, we're offering all the guys who are the Ford team members the chance to drive one of these cars. And, Don was there. Gas Ronda had a car. Hubert Platt was there, all that stuff. We all have cars. So we were all part of the Ford thing. And I knew it was the cars were actually prepped by Strop, which is Hellman with the extension, on the West Coast.
Right, Bill Strop, and then Hellman and Moody on the East Coast, right?
Yeah. And so he did the prep for the car, and I knew that they were they'd be conservative in the camshaft because they were Baja racers and NASCAR racers. So I says, well, I'm going to bring a cam with me when I go out there. And so I called up Crane, who was my sponsor at the time, and I says, I want the best you got, and they whipped up a cam for me, and I took it, and I just kept it in my shall we say option to use or not, because I didn't know if I was going to use it or not. So we tested for 10 days with the car. We had to get it set up. The cars were not finished. We had to get the suspension. We got to do all the things that would constitute taking a brand new car, never been used before, and make it a winner. So I put the cam in. That's basically what, because I basically was running just as fast as the other guys, because they're all the same cars. We all have the same cars. So I said, I want to go faster. So I put the cam in. I picked up 0.2 of a second if I can. Boom. So I had them covered. There was no problem me beating any one of them. And because of that, that was the big deal that changed me, gave me the advantage. At that time, the guy Chuck Folger, I went up to the last around. We went through all these a sea of Mopars. It seemed like there was just everybody had a Mopar, a couple of Chevrolets in there, and I'm talking about the super stock eliminator, not just the class. I won the class, that was easy, but the eliminator was just a cornucopia of different cars. Going through them all, and at the last run, Chuck Folger steps in, and he says to me, he says, "Listen, my job is on the line. I thought you got to win this thing." He says, he put a little extra heat on me. He says, "Good luck." So I won that. I won the Super Stock Eliminator, and I also was the very first Super Stock Eliminator period for Ford. So it was a triple home run for the brand new car. So the introduction was just a mega success. Everybody went out and bought a Cobra Jet as a result of it. Ford now is Super Stock, potential to win, and they win all the time. All Cobra Jets after that win all the time. I never used my car after I used it then one time. I took it home. I put a balls out. I put an actual flat out tunnel port in it when I took the Super Stock engine out and raced Bill Jenkins and all them guys for match races with it. It was the same car. Okay, so we were starting the pro stock thing at the time, and then that was it. That was again, it was a one race magic thing that takes place. That's all.
Back in the day, now I was always a big fan of Super Stock because it was the closest thing to a street car, just like you said. And then Pro Stock. I like Pro Stock too because it was just kind of like a notch or two above. When you were racing against, Sox and Martin, Grumpy, and even other guys in your class. I mean, you had, like I said, Dick Brandon, you had Folger, you had Tasca, all you guys. Was there a lot of camaraderie on the Ford side? And it's like, okay, we're going to go knock these Mopar guys out and these Pontiac guys out and these Chevrolet guys out and stuff? Or was it just like, was there camaraderie as a whole, just in racing?
Yeah, I think everybody got along beautifully. I think everybody was. I enjoyed it. I didn't sense no animosity about anything about anybody. And it was a very good time. It was a good time for me. It was a deal where I need a part they just go to each guy and find one that they had, and they would always surrender to you. They would always help each other, and I did the same thing for them. When we are up on the line, it's different. You try to win. You try to win no matter what. But when you're in the pit, it's you try to be a professional.
Well, like one guy said, he says, "I really want you to run. I want you to. I want to help you fix your car because I want to get you out there on the line so I can beat you." That was a quote from a race car driver.
Well, you don't want to win because the other guy couldn't make it for some reason. You want to win legitimately.
Yeah, exactly. All right, there's two other cars I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about the Boss 429 that you raced, and then I want to talk about the camera-powered Maverick or Pinto. It was a Maverick, wasn't it?
I had both. I had the 429 and a camera in the Maverick.
All right, let's talk about the Boss 429. Now, was that a Ford car? Or was that independently? How did that work there? Because the Boss 429 was a 69 car that you got, and you raced that, and that one you campaigned very successfully as well, right?
And the 69, I never raced it with a 429. I raced it with a camera in it.
Oh, really?
Was the 429 was a permit me because they widened up the engine bay to put the camera in. So that's where I got.
Oh, okay.
Well, it was a convenient way to get going real fast without having to do all that stuff to change it. Okay, that's what I did. I took the 429 out, put it in a corner, put it back in when I sold it, and that's basically. I never raced it with anything but a camera.
Okay, so you never actually raced the Boss 429 engine then.
Oh, no.
Okay, just the camera. Okay, and then the Maverick was also a camera, right?
That's correct. And then when I ran out of camera parts, because we're talking a lot of years now, then there was no parts around. I'm losing heads and cams and all the things that goes with all the rocker arms, all the little mini things you start to really can't get. you wind up finally using them all up. I broke a lot of heads because I broke a lot. I broke a lot of rods, aluminum rods. Basically, we didn't understand that you had to replace them on a routine basis. And then I finally figured that out, and then put a couple pistons through the heads and so forth. That's basically the penalty that and run out of parts. So I basically went to a 429 by default. I didn't want to, but that's basically what I did.
So
and it was a huge disappointment to me. I mean, I had the latest and greatest old stuff that everybody else was using supposedly, and it was slower by far than my camera. And so I says, well, I'm looking at it objectively, and there's the head. They got this giant 3-inch hole in the head, and the camera only has a 2 1/8-inch hole in the head. Okay, so I start looking at this thing objectively, and I start filling them up with epoxy, and I didn't do it all at once. I just started sneaking. I kept going faster, and then I basically nobody understands that the Achilles heel of the camera is that it's 1.3 rock arm ratio. You can only pick up the valve about 665 to 600 or 660,000. That's it. You got 2 cams at the time, and so with the 429, I was getting close to 800,000 at the end. The cams kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we were running 1.7s, 5s, the rock arm ratio, and so we could pick the valve up, which was bigger. Bore size were bigger on the 429. You got more valve to piston area. Everything was much better. And so I went way faster with the 429 as a result of that after I shut down the ports.
Ah, okay. Now, as far as cameras, Ed Pink was kind of like the camera guy on the West Coast. Who was kind of like the camera guy, and who would have been your source for camera parts on the eastern part of the United States? Or did everything come kind of through? Because Ed had kind of a deal with Ford or something, right?
Yeah, he had to deal with Perdone. Perdone basically he worked with Perdone.
Okay.
The Ford deal. As a matter of fact, the first Ford Motorsports I went to, I was sitting at the table with Ed Pink and Don Perdone at the Ford Motors Company. I didn't even know who they were, and they didn't know who I was either. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, we actually sat together. At any rate. Ford was my supplier. I didn't get no parts from anybody else.
Oh, okay. Let me ask you this now. We always used to hear the rumors how Ford's out of racing, Chevrolet's out of racing, Chrysler's out of racing, all that stuff. But we all know that's not true. So we also hear the stories about they had the backdoor deals, where the Chevy boys got all their stuff, and then the Chrysler guys got all their stuff. How did that work with Ford? Was there any kind of like secret backdoor thing where you guys were getting any kind of experimental stuff or any kind of unusual stuff through to support you guys in racing?
Yeah. They what they did was they closed the racing division down, and then they stole money from the marketing department to just gave the money out to the guys to go get their own stuff. You know what I mean? That's basically how they did it.
Okay.
And they snuck a lot of parts from the experimental garage and some of the machines that were some of the parts that were not machined properly. They got machined and all that stuff, meaning they had cores of cams or they got cores of heads, but they weren't finished. Things like that. So they found out the guy who did it originally, and they asked them to do it and so forth at Ford. And so that stuff actually happens through the backdoor stuff. That's how they did it. And of course, Hallman Moody was very active in all that stuff as well. So they could do the same thing.
Well, Al, we are just about up against the clock again, but here's what I want to do. Would you be willing to come back next week and we do part 2? Because here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell some racing stories. And I know you got lots of stories. And because these are the things that people love to hear, like, well, what was it like back in the day? Going match racing against guys like Grumpy and Sox and Martin and people like that. And so I'd like to invite you back next week if we could, and then you can tell us some more stories. And then we can get into some of the other stuff, because the technical stuff is kind of interesting. Now the guys that like the gearheads like myself that wrenched on cars, I understand everything you're talking about, or pretty much everything, but I have a whole litany of questions we didn't even get to yet. But I'd love to be able to talk about some of the really interesting stories. And then some of the people that you come across, people that you had really good relationships with, people that you just were, man, I got to beat this guy, and things like that, because this is kind of inspirational stuff.
Well, I got no problem with that. I basically, I just want to make sure that we talk about that I'm going to be at the October 1st.
Yes.
The Nature Ford Mustang Club at the 13th annual Old Ford Power Show at the Nicholas Ford and Route 41 in the verse. Okay. Can you make sure that?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. There's a guy by the name of Charlie Morris that wrote a book. Okay. And it's about you and about the Mustangs, the CJs, the Bat Car, the airport, which we didn't get a chance to talk about that a little bit, and some of the other stuff that you do. So you will be at Nicholas Ford in Inverness, Florida. That's 40, right, Bobby? Or 40?
State Road 44, Gulf to Lake Highway.
Yeah, Gulf to Lake Highway in Inverness, which is Citrus County. And that, what are the dates again on that, Al?
October 1st.
October 1st. Okay.
October 1st.
All right. And we will help cross promote that, because you will be actually in Florida. Now, right now, you live where? In South Carolina, correct?
That's right.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, Al, we are up against the clock. We're looking forward to it. We can talk about some stuff in the book too. So there's all kinds of stuff, but definitely October 1st at Nicholas Ford in Inverness, Florida, off State Road 44, which is right downtown. Which is, Inverness is a cool little town. We go up there every once in a while, don't we, Bobby? And they have a big car show there on the third Friday of every month. But Al, I want to thank you very much for hanging out with us. We look forward to part 2 with Al Joniak, the legendary Ford drag racer, and he's going to share some really cool racing stories with us next week, aren't you, Al?
It'd be my pleasure.
All right, super. All right, Al, thank you very much. Take care, and we'll be talking to you next week. Thank you very much.
You got it. Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, listeners, that is it. You heard it from the man himself. Now, this guy got really, really, really technical about engines. He figured out the head issue with Fords, and they were either too big or too small. So, an engine basically is an air pump. That's all it is. Okay, so it's all about matter of getting the fuel and air in and out of the motor, and that's how you go fast. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Ford, Chevrolet, or Pontiac, or Chrysler, or Porsche, or Mercedes, or Toyota, or whatever. They're all the same. But anyway, you guys heard it here. If you want to listen to some of the most legendary and fascinating names in motorsports, be sure to tune in to Nostalgic Radio and Cars every Tuesday between 7 and 8 p.m. on the Tan Talk Radio Network, right here in downtown Clearwater. And we will definitely get these conversations going, because these are legends. These are the guys that were around back in the day. These are the pioneers that made racing what it is today. Anyway, on that note, I want to see you guys at some of the car shows. There's a lot of stuff. Weather's getting nice again, so you can start driving again, get that air conditioning working in your cars, and hope to see you at some of the car shows. In the meantime, everybody stay safe, drive carefully, and love your family.
I found an island in your arms, country in your eyes. Arms are chainless, eyes are lined. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through to the other side. Bring on through, oh yeah! Rain to sea, week to week, day to day, hour to hour, day straight, deep and wide.
WTAN, Clearwater.
FM 106.1.
WDCF, Dade City.
FM 102.3.
WZHR, Zephyrhills.
FM 104.3.
Listen.
This is CBS News on the Hour, your home for original reporting.
I'm Jennifer Kuiper in Chicago. President Biden and the First Lady traveled to Buffalo, New York today to meet with those who've lost someone in Saturday's mass supermarket shooting. Mr. Biden calls the shooting domestic terrorism.
The evil did come to Buffalo. has come to all too many places, manifesting gunmen who massacred innocent people in the name of hateful and perverse ideology, rooted in fear and racism.
CBS's Jeff Begay says investigators are going through the 18-year-old suspect's writings, which include other possible targets.
In February of this year, 3 months before the attack, he first mentioned the Tops grocery store, writing, "Damn, that is looking good." He called Tops attack area